Good morning. We're right on schedule, so we'll get started. Thanks for being here today. This budget is being presented at a time of incredible uncertainty caused by the words and actions of the President of the United States on tariffs. To say he's been erratic and unpredictable is an understatement. We simply don't know what tariffs the U.S. will ultimately impose and how long they will remain in effect. As a result, it was not possible to build the exact impact of the tariffs into the budget. You've seen some other provinces include contingencies in their budgets. However, these contingencies are not surpluses that are set aside. There are even larger deficits that will be funded by borrowing. The budget I will be delivering today includes an analysis from the Ministry of Finance on the potential impacts on the tariffs on Saskatchewan. The uncertainties will show why including any amount of contingency at this time would not be realistic. However, we've been cautious on our expenditures in today's budget and prudent on revenues to put us in the best possible financial position to weather the impacts of any tariffs. In developing this budget, we did not allow the tariff threat to back us off on any of our election commitments on affordability and safer communities, or our commitment to deliver change by addressing the challenges of growth like crowded classrooms and access to health care. This budget delivers on those commitments. The 25-26 budget delivers for the people of Saskatchewan. The priorities in the budget reflect the priorities Saskatchewan residents told us were most important to them. Relief from cost of living pressures for everyone in Saskatchewan. Improved access to care for patients and healthcare professionals. Additional supports in the classrooms for students, parents, and teachers. Safer communities for residents in every part of Saskatchewan. And strong financial management. In this year's budget, our government is following through on our promise to ensure the province remains the most affordable place in Canada to live, work, raise a family, and start a business. The budget reduces income taxes for every resident, family, and small business in our province. It helps make life more affordable for seniors, families with children, persons with disabilities, caregivers, new graduates, first-time home buyers, and people renovating their homes. The taxation changes introduced in this budget provide more than $250 million in tax savings this year. This is in addition to the more than $2 billion in affordability measures in each and every budget. The budget also reduces education property tax mill rates across all property classes. There was a news release on that last week. In healthcare, this budget delivers better patient access and safer, more responsive care for Saskatchewan residents. Over the last 2 years, our government has invested $15.7 billion in healthcare in the province. This year, the Ministry of Health will receive a record $8.1 billion, an increase of $485 million, or 6.4%. The Saskatchewan Health Authority will receive an increase of $261 million, or 5.6%, for a record $4.9 billion budget. This funding will provide better access to acute care programs and services to improve patient outcomes, such as reducing surgical wait times as part of an ambitious plan to perform 450,000 procedures over 4 years, and realigning services at Saskatoon City Hospital to address inpatient capacity pressures by opening more than 100 beds. There will also be better and more timely access to primary care, including programs with the goal of connecting all residents to a primary health care provider. The Saskatchewan Cancer Agency will receive $279 million, an increase of $30 million, or 12.2%, to ensure Saskatchewan patients have access to the most current and effective oncology drugs, therapies, and treatment options. Mental health continues to be a priority with this year's budget, delivering critical support and investments to enhance access to mental health and addiction services. To ensure we have the people in place to provide these services, this year's budget delivers on our commitments to accelerate the hiring of healthcare professionals through the Health Human Resources Action Plan. This budget also invests in steady and significant progress on multiple infrastructure projects. Due to the positive response to the Regina Urgent Care Centre, planning is underway for additional urgent care centres in Moose Jaw, Prince Albert, and North Battleford, as well as second urgent care centres in Saskatoon and Regina. The budget also provides new capital funding for the expansion of complex needs emergency shelters in new communities, building on the pilot projects in Regina and Saskatoon. Overall health capital funding will increase by $140 million for a total of $657 million, the highest ever capital budget to deliver major health infrastructure projects. The 25-26 budget is delivering increased opportunities and supports for kindergarten to grade 12 students, parents, and teachers across Saskatchewan. Over the last 2 years, we've invested more than $5 billion in kindergarten to grade 12 education. The Ministry of Education will receive $3.5 billion, an increase of $184 million, or 5.5% over the previous year. This year includes an increase of $186 million, or 8.4%, in school operating funding for a total of $2.4 billion. This budget includes an increase of $130 million to fund a new teacher collective agreement and address growing student enrollment and the challenges facing today's classrooms. Building on last year's pilot project, the budget provides funding for 50 additional specialized support classrooms to help reduce interruptions by providing additional supports to students who need them. The budget delivers on the challenges of student enrollment growth by investing in new schools with a $191 million school capital budget. This includes ongoing funding for the 21 new or consolidated schools and 3 major renovations underway across Saskatchewan, as well as funding to begin planning for 1 new replacement school and pre-planning for 4 new schools in the Saskatoon area. The budget also supports students as they advance into post-secondary education. The Ministry of Advanced Education will receive $788 million in this year's budget, with $1.6 billion invested in post-secondary education over the past 2 years. The budget will provide post-secondary institutions with capital funding to respond to growth pressures and provide updated and modern learning environments. The 25-26 budget also delivers safer communities across the province by enhancing the presence of law enforcement in Saskatchewan. Over the last 2 years, our government has invested $2 billion into community safety. For the upcoming fiscal year, the Ministry of Corrections, Policing, and Public Safety will receive $798 million, including $119 million for the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency, while the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General will receive $271 million. Increases to the Municipal Police Grant Program will help frontline officers respond to more calls for service, while increased funding for the RCMP will support operations in the province. The budget also includes funding for previous commitments for approximately 100 new municipal police officers, 14 new Safer Communities and Neighborhoods personnel, and funding for the Saskatchewan Police College to train more officers in the province. To complement the increased presence of law enforcement personnel, the budget includes funding to improve safety for correctional staff, offenders, and the public, as well as address capacity concerns at correctional facilities. Additional investments will be made in interpersonal violence programs and services, including second-stage housing. The budget also delivers funding to create a more accessible court system for municipal bylaw offenses and ensuring cases are complete and ready to move to trial more quickly. Overall, the 25-26 budget delivers on the priorities of affordability, healthcare, education, community safety, and fiscal responsibility. However, it delivers more than that. Some other important investments include a record $362 million in municipal revenue sharing, an increase of $22 million, or 6.3%. The Ministry of Social Services will receive $1.6 billion in this year's budget, an increase of $70 million, or 4.5%. $9 million in new funding to start multi-year repair and renovation projects for 285 Saskatchewan Housing Corporation-owned units in Saskatoon, Regina, and Prince Albert. $25 million for services developed through the provincial approach to homelessness. $11 million to increase benefits by 2% for Saskatchewan Income Support and Saskatchewan Assured Income for Disability clients starting May of 25, and $20 million increase across government for community-based organizations. Finally, I'm pleased to report that the 25-26 budget is balanced. It delivers strong financial management for the people of Saskatchewan, prioritizing affordability and delivering necessary programs and services. Overall, the surplus of $12 million is forecast for this year's budget. The surplus is driven by forecast revenues of $21.1 billion, an increase of $1.2 billion or 6%, Total expense is projected to be $21 billion, which is an increase of $909 million, or 4.5%. Revenues are forecast to increase due to a combination of increased corporate income tax, PST, and uranium resource royalties. While a significant increase budget over budget, revenues are up significantly in the most recent forecast for the 24-25 fiscal year, so this forecast is in line with current year projections. In the 25-26 budget, gross debt is expected to increase by $2.5 billion from the March 31st, 25 forecast. This is due to borrowing for the Saskatchewan capital plan as well as capital spending by Crown corporations and other government entities. This budget does not require new borrowing for operations. Despite the increased debt, Saskatchewan maintains the second lowest net debt to GDP ratio among Canadian provinces. We also have the second best credit rating among the provinces when the ratings from the three major agencies are considered. Saskatchewan's strong financial position in the 25-26 budget is buoyed by the provincial economy's solid performance in 2024. The provincial economy is expected to build upon this momentum in 2025. In Saskatchewan, we have a history of delivering when it really counts. That's what the 25-26 budget is doing, delivering for the people of Saskatchewan. Be happy to take any questions now. If there's any technical questions I can't answer, Max is here as well as some other officials. So we'll start with the questions. Yep, go ahead. So we looked at that. We had a great deal of discussion on this. You've seen some provinces introduce their budgets with the contingency in place. It looks like some won't. I think Manitoba's budget's tomorrow, and from what I see in the papers, I think they're going to do something very comparable to what we're doing. But the fact of the matter is the provincial budgets that have been released, it's not like they have a separate account of money that they're setting aside just in case for contingency. It's increasing an already existing deficit in their budget. So to us, we don't know what the tariffs are going to do, what the cost is going to be. They're changing by the day, it seems. You do see an analysis in the budget. The Ministry of Finance officials have done an analysis, but it just shows how uncertain times are. So we thought the best way to weather potential tariffs in a strong financial position, we focused on education, healthcare, community safety, and affordability. Beyond that, we're very prudent with expenditures to keep costs low, to get in a surplus position. If the tariffs are on for an extended period of time, it'll push us into a deficit position. But if they're not, we're comfortable with where we're sitting.
So how does that fit with your team of delivering, or you really don't know, you acknowledge that you're delivering at this point? Why not postpone the budget until April, until maybe there's a little bit more certainty what gets done in April 1st? That's what Ontario has done. Why not take a few options available to you to present something that might deal with the needs that seem inevitable?
That's a valid point. The problem with postponing the budget, I think, is simply that, my concern is we might be living with this uncertainty for a number of years, and we still might very well not know any more in April as far as tariffs and where they're going to eventually land for quite a while yet. So we thought it was prudent to, what we're doing here is you're seeing a budget laid out that we're comfortable with, a balanced budget, and saying, look, there's an analysis on the tariffs included in that. There's a worst case scenario on the tariffs included in that. But again, things keep changing daily. So you're going to hear me later today. The first thing I'm going to address in my speech is the tariffs, saying that they're going to have an impact if they're on for an extended period of time. But it's difficult to deal with the uncertainty. We felt the best way to deal with it is simply to make sure we're in a strong fiscal position. Alex? So obviously, this is a snapshot in time. There's always changes in a budget, revenue and expenditure, and we're openly acknowledging that, nobody knows where the tariffs are going to land. They're going to have an impact. Again, as we go through the year, we're going to do the best to keep expenses in check. We hope the revenues were accurate or potentially come in higher than anticipated. You know, you saw last fiscal year, not the one we're in, but a deficit was anticipated, and at fiscal year end, we actually had, I think, about $180 million surplus. So both revenues and expenditures change as the years go on. The budget's an estimate. It's a best guess at the time. Lisa?
How do you defend not including anything about tariffs in this budget, not factoring that in when people in the province are having to do that with their own budgets? They're looking at their budget saying, can we do this in the House? Can we buy this? They need to figure that out with their.
I think we are doing exactly that. We're not, you know, to your point, we are addressing it in the budget. There's an analysis by the Ministry of Finance on the potential impacts this would happen. You know, you use the analogy to people doing in their own household budgets. I think it is very comparable. You know, I don't think people are saying, well, I'm going to budget X number of dollars for tariffs. Most people who are good with their finances are going to look at this and saying, you know, there's some uncertainty in the world right now, so I'm going to make sure I've got enough money to cover all my bills. I'm going to make sure I can handle something unforeseen. So I think you're seeing something very comparable to what you just laid out.
Taking on $2.5 billion worth of debt, how do you justify that to taxpayers who want to see it go down?
It's, you know, it's capital debt. I would compare it to when somebody gets a mortgage on their house. You know, you're incurring debt, but you're doing it because you need a place to live. In this case, that debt is for Crown corporations, for capital assets that they're providing to the people of the province. And it's also to pay for, you know, I just mentioned a number of capital projects. It's to pay for new hospitals and urgent care centers and schools and the capital assets that people of the province need. Yeah, you know, if you look at it from a business standpoint, if business is expanding, they frequently add to capital debt. You see the province expanding. Our population's higher than it's ever been before. That creates demands on education, healthcare, community services, policing.
I wanted to ask about urgent care centers. You mentioned obviously that there's a plan for more to come, a second one in Regina, a second one in Saskatoon. How do you plan to staff those facilities? Obviously they're a little bit in the future, but I mean, even the current one open in Regina isn't operating 24 hours a day. So right. How do you plan for that in the future?
Through a number of ways. Obviously, that is a difficult situation right now. It's not just Saskatchewan experiencing that, right across the country. In fact, beyond the country, we're in a situation right now. It's just simple demographics. As baby boomers retire, the groups coming up to replace them aren't as large, and so there's a number of industries that are having problems staffing up. So we're going to do a number of ways. In our health action plan, you see increased training seats for a variety of healthcare professionals. You've seen in the past, and I think you'll see in the future, recruitment trips to different areas around the world trying to recruit. So you know, it's going to be it'll be a challenge, but we want to provide those services to the people of Saskatchewan, and we've got a lot of very professional, very dedicated officials that are going to work very hard at that recruitment. Nope.
We know about the uncertainty with the tariffs, but what about the uncertainty of drought, natural disaster, forest fire, things of that nature? We know that that's kind of thrown off budgets in the past. And I'm
just wondering about your comments about what's basically going to happen this year and how the budget is going to handle that prospect.
Sure. I think the first thing, two major things come to mind for me. One is the impact in the agriculture. I'll come back to that in a second. The other one is potential for wildfires. There's 4 new air tankers being purchased in the budget, so you know, that'll be beneficial in that case. On the agriculture front, if you know, the weather is difficult to predict, and you've seen, for example, last year what looked like a bumper crop, and then we had an extended period of hot, dry weather in the summer that really hurt crop forecasts. So crop insurance is based on, that's where the hit would come to the provincial finances, the crop insurance, and it's based on a 10-year average. So when you have had a couple of difficult years like we've had lately, that gets factored in because it's now front and center on the 10-year average. So, you know, we've had our budget's been a surplus position in crop insurance in 6 of the last 10 years. 4 of the last 10, it hasn't. So I think just the math using the last 10-year average, it'll be, to your point, John, any changes in the weather will be reflected in those estimates.
I want to turn for a second to the municipal revenue sharing. I was speaking to some mayors last night, and they said that the money that was announced at SARM just recently wasn't going to be enough for the infrastructure projects that they're going to be dealing with. What would you say to the mayors and Reeves who are looking at this number saying it's only 22 million, and the majority of that's going to go to Saskatoon and Regina, and it's going to leave the smaller urban, smaller rural communities out in the lurch?
You know, I would respectfully disagree. I come from the rural area. That's over 6% increase in revenue sharing. I come from the municipal sector as well, and I remember being on the other side of this for many years at SARM, advocating to the provincial government, saying we need something sustainable, we need something predictable, and we need something unconditional. Get that for us and just let us do our own operations. And at times that gets forgotten. This revenue sharing program is, and I would invite any of those Reeves and mayors to contact colleagues across the country. It is, I can assure you, the envy of this country, municipal revenue sharing. And so I just would say I think most municipal people in this province understand that and appreciate that.
One of the concerns, though, is the infrastructure funding that municipalities are struggling with right now. Wastewater treatment facilities are not a quote-unquote sexy thing to talk about, but they cost millions of dollars right now. How does this budget address the growing concerns and the growing communities that municipalities are seeing residents come to their communities?
So municipal infrastructure programs like the ones you're talking about, water and sewer projects, while as you put it aren't sexy, they're obviously very important. What we've always done in the past, that's traditionally been sort of a tripartite agreement. It's been the federal government, provincial government, municipal governments. Now those historically, whoever the government of the day is federally, historically there's some version of funding like that. Obviously soon we're going to be into a federal election, and at some point once things settle down, I would expect whoever wins that, there'll be some sort of program like that coming out again, and the province will certainly step up and do our share on that.
When it comes to your thinking about this budget as we go forward, what keeps you up at night?
I think keeping me up at night, I would say it's probably the unknown situation with the tariffs. You know, it as far as how it impacts the budget and how it's just going to impact our economy overall. We have an export-based economy. People that talk protectionism, it always bothers me. I mean, free trade is good for Saskatchewan, it's good for the country, and frankly, it's good for North America. So probably that, I would say, is the single biggest concern in this.
Why the dire need to present a surplus, given the uncertainties? There's 1,000 things that could go wrong. $12 million seems a lot to me, but I don't think it is.
No, you're right. In the big picture, 12 million is, you know, it's essentially a balanced budget. I think it's important, frankly, that, you know, as I said earlier, it's important that we don't overspend. We make sure we've got adequate revenues. We make sure we're in a strong fiscal position. So depending on how big an impact, and again, there's an analysis in the budget, worst case analysis, but if it does have a huge impact, that we're able to weather that. If we're going into this with a, you know, $1 billion deficit, or pick your number, and then you add the tariffs on top of that and the affected economy, it could be, you know, it could be very, very bad for provincial.
Just a reluctance to use the D word, like, I mean,
No, not at all. You know, as I mentioned earlier, Murray, if we're in a situation that the tariffs are on for an extended period of time, it will push us into a deficit. We're being very open about that. We're just We're just presenting a prudent budget. If all else being equal, we think we're in very strong fiscal shape. Alex?
So during the election, there was this anticipated 3 years of deficits that was put forward. We've got basically a balanced budget now. Are there certain things that you weren't able to do with an eye tariffs with an eye of uncertainty? Because it seems like there wasn't intention for a single party to run deficits for 3 years to increase that and to address certain problems.
Interesting question. So a couple points I would make on that. The first one is that we were the beneficiary of, I would say, stronger than anticipated, if you go back a year, corporate income tax, PST, and uranium royalties have shown in the current fiscal strength, I guess, above what was anticipated. So that put us in a strong revenue position. And on the expense side, to your point, you know, the way the Treasury Board process works is all the ministers, their officials come in, meet with Treasury Board for each individual ministry. Everybody has asks, everybody has things that they would like to see in expenditures, but we had to say no in a lot of instances because we wanted to focus on what we heard about in the election campaign, which is health, education, and affordability and community safety. So that's where the focus was. Other than that, you'll see, you know, I'd say a very prudent on the expenditure side budget to get us to the position you're seeing today.
Regarding the changes to the small increase to the income support programs, the 2% increase, by my math, looking at Statistics Canada's calculations of inflation over the past year, that would be slightly below the rate of inflation in Canada. So I would like to know how you arrived at that 2% figure and if that is sufficient.
The intent for that was to be in the neighborhood of the inflationary rate. The budget was put together a few weeks ago. The last number you saw from Revenue Canada on inflation was up slightly. It was under 2% at that point. So we wanted that to be in the range of the inflation rate.
So is it sufficient?
Well, obviously, we're going to, you know, I mean, we don't know what the inflation rate will be next month. Tariffs could drive it up. If common sense prevails on the tariff front, it'll probably be lower, and this will look high again. So, you know, we only set that once a year. We set it at about the rate of inflation. It'll be revisited again in the next budget cycle.
Yeah, you were talking about the surgical wait times, the planned reduced wait times, and the some 450,000 surgeries over 4 years. You called that plan ambitious. I'm just wondering what's ambitious about it. Why did you use that term?
Just because in comparison to the number of surgeries that have been done annually in the past, it's an increase. You know, you heard some of your colleagues ask questions about recruiting healthcare professionals. That's always a challenge. So that's where the word ambitious came from.
I guess what factors, what's the success of that plan contingent on financially?
The finances will be there for it. It's in the budget. I would think the challenges would be much of what was discussed earlier, making sure that we have the human resource capability to do it.
Earlier in the technical briefing, earlier in the technical briefing, we were talking about the third quarter update. There was some expenses over budget with regards to health last year. 382 million was largely to do with overtime pay and utilization of certain things, whether it be contract nurses, physician costs, those sorts of things. Just wondering how this budget would account for those continued stresses to
A number of things, I think, and I'm going to get Max to comment on this in a minute, but I think part of that, there was probably some wage settlements in there as well. There would also be, there's an onus in this budget, we're trying to move away from as much contract nursing and more permanent, which would also help expenditures. It's a snapshot in time, right? The best estimate that our officials can do at that point. Max, I don't know if I missed
Yeah,
anything.
no, the minister's correct. Like the biggest amount is the SHA costs, and you know that's largely driven by overtime. And so, as I said in the technical briefing, you know, I think the work is being done in earnest to reduce the overtime costs, and that will include things like moving from part-time casual to full-time nursing. But as well, we're paying a premium for contract nursing right now, and we need to actually regularize our workforce to make sure that we're paying kind of the base salary rates for nursing. So there's been a lot of work going on, and it's been ongoing for many years. On the physician utilization side, some of that's obviously due to our increased population, and we build in a utilization increase into our budget as well. So we try to take that into account on a go-forward basis. So, yeah.
Obviously, you presented some numbers according to follow up on the Affordability Act. Can you just remind us what does this mean at the end of the year for, let's say, a family of 4? How much will they save at the end of the year?
Sure. Over the next 4 years, for a family of 4, it'll be $3,400 in savings. For seniors, it'll be a senior couple, it would be $3,100. So it's significant to people. Again, I think a number of those changes to taxes, it lets people keep more money in their own jeans and use it where they most need it.
Hi there. Just on the tariffs and all of that, you have the analysis there. Saskatchewan can weather the storm, the budget document says. You may face some criticism that the province has no plan here to address what is likely coming. So I'm just curious what the actual plan is here, because I just don't see that in the document.
The plan, I would say, is just simply to have us in as strong a fiscal position as we can, so whatever hit that the tariffs end up impacting on provincial fiscal situation, we can weather it, as I said. This is a difficult situation. You've seen our premier, advocating strongly both with the federal government and with elected people he knows in the United States. This is just a difficult situation to deal with because it's unknown. We don't know. You probably, I saw the news reports yesterday of the Evraz situation where he announced that Crowns are going to be purchasing from them to keep their folks working and to keep things going as normal there. And I think it was the vice president with Evraz made the comment about he was getting on a plane and the tariffs were 25%. Just as he got on, they were 50. By the time he got off the plane, they dropped in half again. I mean, that's how quick things are changing. That's how difficult this is to plan. So quite simply, I think what we're going to do as a province, we're going to keep advocating as the premier has. We're also going to keep looking for other markets for our folks, for products. That's why you see the trade missions. That's why you see the international trade offices, which we've been criticized for, but I think now show more than ever the importance of that, of having other markets and not be beholden to just one market. And again, I come back to being as in as strong a fiscal position as we can to weather any impacts. That's the plan.
Sorry, and just to follow up on this spending, it's budgeted up this year compared to last year for things like health. When you look at where we are this fiscal year, end of March, the health dollars are more than what is budgeted for 2026. So you may face some criticism there that could look like a cut in some case, or it's not meeting the need there. Just how do you respond to that?
I would just rest on our record. When the need's there, this government has always responded. You see the onus we put on healthcare, both capital and operational, and that's not about to change.
You are projecting a surplus of $12 million, and from the funding for advanced ed from last year to this year, there's a $5 million cut. I'm just wondering what the rationale is that you're giving post-secondary institutions with that cut.
There's the reason for what looks like a cut is because some capital projects that were ready, some capital that was originally anticipated to be put in this upcoming budget was put in the current fiscal. And as far as operational funding, so we had a multi-year agreement with post-secondary institutions, And originally, the anticipation was we would have a new one in place for this budget, but there's been a lot of changes happening with federal cuts to student visas, example. We felt it was a good move to have another year for our officials to deal with post-secondary officials, see what that looks like. So what we did for this year, sorry, I'm going to back up a minute again. Last year, even though the multi-year agreement that everybody had agreed to left the last 2 years of the agreement flat, same amount of money so that we could front load it for the post-secondaries, inflation was at a higher rate than was anticipated, so we gave them a lump sum $12 million. We've built that into the base now in this budget. And there's also a $6 million increase on top of that as well. So for 1 year, you see that operational funding increase while we work on a multi-year agreement for next year.
$2 million reduction for Creative Sask. The last year, we've had probably half a dozen news conferences with a member of your government being excited about film.
You know, it's a $2 million reduction over last year, but if you look over the last period of years, I don't have those numbers in front of me, at least so we can get them, but actually it's still a substantial increase kind of year over year to, if you look the last number of years. So it's just a recognition, I think, as I mentioned earlier, our focus on this budget, what people told us they want to focus on is health, education, affordability, safety. And in a number of other areas, we were more fiscally cautious.
Can you tell us in what way your plan does include the farmers? How does it protect the farmers against the US and Chinese tariffs?
Tariffs, again, it's so unforeseen. We don't know what kind of impact. Frankly, what I think is concerning farmers much more right now than the U.S. tariffs is the Chinese tariff on canola. That could have a potentially terrible outcome for the province, for canola growers. So we're going to keep an eye on that. But obviously, if we get into a situation because of tariffs, Chinese or U.S., that it impacts, jobs. Businesses, we're going to have discussions with the federal government about that. I would also point out to your point about farmers on the canola side, the Premier has advocated with the federal government to do something. It's been incredibly quiet about this. In my view, you don't hear enough about it because the canola tariffs by the Chinese could have a huge impact.
Just to follow up on that, you are talking about the federal government, but in which way does the provincial government can do something about it? Are you planning any programs, initiatives?
The problem with that is those tariffs were put on by the federal government as a response. The Chinese government put the tariffs on canola as a response to the federal government putting tariffs on EVs. So it's extremely concerning for us. They're putting tariffs on Chinese EVs, which I don't see many people driving them. I don't think they're very popular. And yet it's alienated the Chinese government to the point of retaliation that Saskatchewan farmers and canola crush operators are paying the price for. That's why we're going to need the federal government to cooperate in this. Anything else? Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time. Look forward to seeing you this afternoon. Thank you.